realignment, the run-pass balance, expectations for the freshmen, best interviews. We got lots of questions here during the first week of training camp, so this mailbag is jam-packed on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's the end of the week. It's Friday, and it's the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know the website. It's right there below, Panther-Lair.com, where we have tons of Pitt coverage from the first week of training camp. Everything you need to know about what's going on in the South Side, everything you want to know about what's going on in the South Side, everything everybody had to say on Wednesday in the South Side during Media Day. We've been pumping out that content all day yesterday. We've got more of it coming today and through the weekend. Lots of good coverage. We'll, of course, be in the South Side for coverage of today's Pitt Spring Camp practice, or training camp practice, That's going on this morning in the South Side. And we'll have lots of coverage from that. Both on the website at Panther-Lair.com and right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. These daily Morning Pitt videos, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m., our post-game shows that we're going to be doing once the games actually start. We'll have Pat Narduzzi press conference videos and post-practice interviews and practice highlights, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of videos that as a Pitt fan you don't want to miss. So make sure you tune in at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you subscribe so you can keep up on all the videos that we put out here. Now, of course, at the website Panther-Lair.com, every week we take questions from Pitt fans for our mailbag edition, and we got some great questions this week about a whole variety of topics. I'm really excited to get into this. But before we do, I got to talk to you about homefieldapparel.com. You've heard me talk about home field before. I'm going to keep talking about home field, and pretty soon, right there, you're going to see there's a promo code. I should have made it so it fits on the screen just a little bit better than that. But the promo code LAIR23. First time you shop at homefieldapparel.com, you're going to get 15% off Home Field's gear, and you can see a couple of the shirts right there. That Golden Panthers, Winking Panther shirt on a ringer tee is dynamite. I mean, that is a great design. The key with Home Field is that they really dig into a school's history and tradition and logos they've used in the past and looks they've used in the past. They try to go for a classic look with Pitt or any of the other 150 teams that they're licensed to sell gear for. Or gear with the markings from those schools. And the Pitt collection is awesome. I mean, they dig deep. They've got stuff with the 1959, logos from the 50s, logos from the 80s, logos from the 2000s. They got a sweet dad hat with a Walking Panther logo on it. I mean, it's great stuff. And if you've never shopped at Home Field before, first of all, what are you doing? But if you've never shopped at Home Field before, here's your chance to get 15% off your first order with the promo code LAIR23. It's high-quality gear, super soft T-shirts. They fit great, and they look awesome. So you need some T-shirts, you need some hoodies, you need some joggers, you need a hat. For this season, that's the place to do it. Homefieldapparel.com, and don't forget that promo code LAIR23, LAIR23. No spaces, just LAIR23 to get 15% off your first order. And our first question today for the mailbag comes from our friend Smenges, and he asks, what do you expect as the split between the pass and run plays in the 2023 Pitt offense? And this is an interesting question. I think Jim Hammond and I actually talked about this on Wednesday night during the live show a little bit, because we looked up the math real quick, and I think it was about, not accounting for sacks or scrambles, just if you look at, raw data without any real context of total plays run. I think it was like 912 or so. And then, run plays, I think there were 520 some, and pass plays, whatever the difference there is. It ended up being about 57% run. And you want to take a few percentage points off for sacks and scrambles that ultimately count as run plays. We could do that. But it ended up being about 57% run, 43% pass. I'm guessing that the number is going to be similar this year. I don't see this being a pass-heavy offense. I think they're going to stick to what they do and what they want to do, even though they don't have Izzy Abanikanda. And shout out to him for his play last night. But even though they don't have Izzy Abanikanda, I think they've got good running backs, and I think they're going to be committed to running the ball. And I think they're going to keep running it Maybe not as much. Maybe it'll drop down and it'll be closer to 50-50. Maybe it'll be like 54 or 53%, maybe 52. I don't see it being imbalanced in favor of the pass. And maybe if we take out sacks and scrambles, we'll be like, oh, look, see, it was this much closer than we thought. But I don't see it being like 54-40, 55-45 pass run. It's far more likely to be 55-45 run pass. And my guess is it might be, like I say, maybe around 53-47 run pass. But I think it'll still be an imbalance in favor of the run. Panther Hog 1 has a question. Perfect. This is topical this week. It says, let's talk realignment. Who should you look for, or what should you look out for if your car needs realigned? Well, you should look out for to be, because you should add that in there. If your car needs to be realigned, that's what you should look out for. To be. Your car needs to be realigned. The dishes need to be washed. The roof needs to be replaced. That's what you should look out for. Thunder Pit Road says, how long do you expect the safeties to adapt to their new starting roles, and are you concerned they could potentially cost Pitt a win early in the season? Yeah, a little bit. To answer that last part first, yeah, I'm a little concerned that they could cost Pitt a win. There have been plays that the safeties have given up in the past, and there have been times where the safeties look really bad, like the Oklahoma State game in 2017. You talk to some of the linebackers on the roster that year, they say, yeah, the safeties look bad, but we were the big part of the problem because we were letting James Washington get this free release off the line of scrimmage, and he was running straight with a head of steam at Bryson Garner and those guys, and there was little they could do in that situation. So it wasn't always the safeties, and they're going to need help from the guys up front. But yeah, the safeties are the last line of defense in any defensive system, and certainly that's the case in this defense. I think the field safety is one of the most demanding positions in this defense. The boundary safety has a whole lot on its plate as well, and those guys are going to have some challenges. You see Donovan McMillan right there, and he's going to be a guy who's playing a lot in a significant role. A few things that I think about the safeties this year. I think that, I think it's going to take them a little bit of time. Pat Narduzzi and Randy Bates have pointed out multiple times about mistakes that the safeties made, particularly Javon McIntyre in the Sun Bowl. While everybody was getting all excited about all the interceptions, they were focused on some of the mistakes that nearly cost them the game. And so you're going to have some of those. And I think even like Brandon Hill, Eric Howlett probably had some of those early on. DeMar Hamlin, Paris isn't a great example, but Jordan Whitehead had those mistakes early on while they learned the defense and got comfortable playing it on the field. One of the upsides, and Randy Bates pointed this out to me on Wednesday, one of the upsides is that all these guys have played. Javon McIntyre got a lot of playing time late last season. P.J. O'Brien's been on the field quite a bit. Donovan McMillan played at Florida. Steph Hall, a little bit less playing time, but he's been out there. He's gotten some of that game experience, and that's going to help them. I also think you're going to see more of a rotation than you saw the last, who knows how many years. When it was Ford and Hamlin, it was Ford and Hamlin, as long as they were both eligible to be in a game and they hadn't been disqualified and ejected. When it was Hallett and Hill, it was Hallett and Hill. This year, I don't know if there's just going to be two guys that you see all the time. I think it's going to be a mix and a rotation with, McIntyre, Hall, O'Brien, and McMillan, and maybe in that order, maybe not. But I think it's going to be a rotation where all four of those guys play. How long is it going to take? I don't know. Could it cost them a game? Sure, it could. If you're in a close game in Morgantown, if you're in a close game against Cincinnati, if you're in a close game against North Carolina, one big play can make the difference, and one misread, one missed tackle, one just poor angle from an inexperienced player can be the difference in that kind of situation. And so, yeah, I think that's a real threat, at least through the month of September. A real risk and something you keep an eye out for. You would like to hope that those things will be taken care of by the time they get to October, especially since they're playing 5 games in September. You would like to think that they're pretty settled in by the time they get to October, but that remains to be seen. Pitman 2003 says, what do you think is Narduzzi's honest-to-God assessment of Cignetti to date? What would he say if asked and given truth serum? That's an interesting question. My guess, and this is based, like Pat Narduzzi has not told me this, Nobody close to him has told me this. My guess, if you got Pat Narduzzi on Truth Serum and asked him about Frank Cignetti, he would probably tell you that Cignetti didn't handle the quarterback situation as well as he could have last year. And I don't necessarily mean in terms of benching guys or replacing guys, but just how he worked with Keaton Slovis and how he developed the offense around Keaton Slovis. I think he would tell you that. I think he liked the commitment to the run and the dedication to running the ball and really creating a sound running scheme. I mean, it wasn't just Izzy Abanikanda making plays. I mean, it was a good scheme. It was a good system for running the ball, and I think Pat Narduzzi would tell you that as well. I think he would also tell you that this year the passing game needs to improve quite a bit. I mean, he didn't say that. I'm trying to make a reference to the 2 Sean Watson years, right? And I think it was pretty clear coming out of the second one that Narduzzi felt like the passing game wasn't getting better under Watson and wasn't going to get better under Watson, and so he made a change. Could I see him firing Frank Cignetti after this year if the passing game doesn't improve? It probably depends on how many games it costs them. It cost them games last year. It cost them 2. If it costs them 2 or 3 this year, I don't know. We could see Narduzzi do what Narduzzi often does. Belchick 927, and I apologize if I mispronounced that there, says, have the expectations for this year's true freshman wide receiver class arisen out of need due to the lack of depth and the necessity for someone to step up, or is the hype more due to the view that this group has legitimate talent and the potential to be special? That's an interesting question. And the answer is both. I mean, I really think the answer is both. I think there are high expectations for this group to contribute because they're going to need to. They have to. I mean, we talked to Taekwon Underwood on Wednesday. He was like, yeah, pretty much, it's Mumfield and Means and then a bunch of guys who haven't really done anything. And there's not a big separation in terms of experience and on-field contributions between Kenny Johnson and Jay Wabuko, between, Izzy Polk and Javonte Royal. And quite frankly, between Lamar Seymour and Dejon Reynolds. Dejon Reynolds has been in college for a couple years, and he's played in a few games in the SEC, but it's not like he's played a ton. And so, yeah, part of it is due to necessity. It's due to the need they have just to get guys, just by the numbers, somebody's going to have to play. I also think at the same time there's genuine hype and excitement for these players themselves. I guess one way you could look at it is, if this was last year's wide receiver room, as it stood at the beginning of the year with Jared Wayne and Canate Mumfield and Bub Means and Jalen Barden and Jaden Bradley, where would we see these 4 freshmen fitting in? If you put these 4 guys as incoming freshmen on last year's week 1 roster, how would we see? Would we be talking about how one is definitely going to play, 2 will probably play, and there's a possibility a third could burn his red shirt as well? Would we be talking about it in those terms? My guess is no. We might say there's a pretty good chance one of those guys will burn his red shirt. But because I think there's more hype around these guys than there was around last year's freshman wide receivers. No disrespect to Addison Copeland and Jay Wabuko, but I get the impression that the coaches are more excited about Izzy Polk and Kenny Johnson this year than, and Zion Fowler must have made some kind of catch on Wednesday because everybody was talking about it Wednesday afternoon. There's more hype. I sense more hype and excitement from the coaches around those guys now than I sensed from the staff around last year's freshmen at this point. So it's a little bit of both. But because the numbers are what they are, I think it's more likely that you're going to get some of those guys on the field and they're going to be needed and they're going to play. Jam05 Pitt says, top 3 favorite coaches to interview, including assistant coaches since you started covering Pitt. That's a great question. I'm almost inclined to just say all the offensive line coaches, but that's not entirely true. John Peterson wasn't a great interview, but Huber, what was Huber's first name? Jim Huber, Paul Christ's offensive line coach, was a great interview. Dave Borbely is a great interview. Tony Wise was a pretty good interview. I would definitely say Huber and Borbely are pretty high on the list of great interviews. Who else? Who else is a good interview who we really enjoy? I mean, of the head coaches, I mean, Dave Wanstead was great. I mean, of course, I think Pat Narduzzi has his moments, but he can be frustrating to transcribe because it is, as I've said before, he doesn't always use full sentences. Charlie Partridge is good, but Charlie decides when he wants to tell you something and when he doesn't. In his own best interest, and that's fine. I don't begrudge him that, but you can tell when that switch gets flipped of, okay, I'm not going to get anything out of this answer. Who else? Andre Powell. I'll say this. What I look for in a great interview is someone who's candid and honest. It is not going to just revert to cliches. I don't expect them to tell me everything and lay it all out there. Well, this guy sucked in practice today. This guy blew a block in that game and ended up getting the quarterback hurt. This guy cost us the game. I don't expect that stuff, although we've heard it from time to time. What was it? David Walker, way back on Wanstead's staff, the running backs coach, was pretty honest about things. I mean, I remember him in 2007, or I think it was 2007, saying, LaShawn McCoy, if he doesn't hold the ball, if he doesn't have better ball control, if he has better ball security, he's not going to play. Because we'll put guys out there who will take care of the ball. Because Shady had a little bit of a fumbling problem. But you don't have to do that. I don't need you to be hypercritical. I know these guys aren't going to go over the top and telling us all that kind of stuff. But just be candid in some regards. If I ask you a basic question, something that's relatively simple, I need you to explain something to me, explain it to me. You know what I mean? Like, make it make sense. If I ask you something, I can ask Dave Borbley, usually Charlie Partridge, usually Andre Powell. I can ask those guys questions and get something pretty honest for the most part. And so I like guys like that. And Jim Huber was that way. Borbley was that way. Powell is that way to some extent. Greg Gattuso was pretty good back on Wanstead's staff. David Walker, like I said, was pretty forthcoming. I don't remember anything about any of Todd Graham's guys. On Paul Chryst' staff, Huber, like I mentioned. Jeez, I don't even know. I don't know if anybody else. Because Joe Rudolph wouldn't really get too deep on anything. Matt House, Chris Herring. Chris Herring was one of the worst. Bobby Ingram was pretty good. He was here for like a year. So that's what I look for, and O-line coaches tend to be the most reliable in that regard. Rocky Panther says, do you think Canate Mumfield will take a big jump forward after having last year to adjust? He didn't meet expectations, in my opinion. Yeah, not mine either. I do think there's a good chance that he's going to take a step forward. I do think that after adjusting to the Power 5 level, I think I think it's reasonable to expect him to have a better year this year than he had last year. I've talked a lot about his usage. I've talked a lot about how he took like 70% of his snaps at Akron. He was lined up out wide, whereas at Pitt, he was in the slot for more than 55 or 60% of his snaps. I've talked about the average depth of target. I was about 3.5 yards further downfield at Akron than it was at Pitt. And so, those things really add up. Those things are interesting to me. And maybe I'm looking at them wrong. Maybe I'm making too much of these numbers. Maybe if I broke down the film, I'd see, of course, this is the way Pitt was using him. But it seems to me that he needs to be working outside and he needs to be attacking sort of the mid-range, middle distance plays more than he did last year. It was interesting on Media Day. Carter Johnson, I think it was, referred to Dejon Reynolds as working out of the slot. So maybe they're looking at Reynolds more in the slot and Mumfield more outside. That seems like that's what worked at Akron. Admittedly, different defenses, different level of different offenses, different level of competition. But when he lined up there and ran those kind of plays, he did better than when he did what he did at Pitt last year. So I'll be interested to see not just how he does in his second year of playing at this level, but what his usage looks like, this season as well. Couple others, two more here I want to get to. Balboa 10 says, if say 4 teams leave the ACC, the revenue would remain the same from ESPN, but the teams would generate more money from fewer teams. Does this sound correct? Yeah, it sounds correct to me. If you're getting X amount of money, if the TV deal is for X amount of money and 2 or 3 or 4 teams leave, and the conference is able to stay intact and maintain the TV deal, which probably is the question that would be raised, then yeah, you still have that X amount of money, and it's getting divided by 10 or 11 or 12 instead of 14. You don't have to do, you don't need the calculator to do the math on that one. You win. You get more money. Now, if the ACC loses 4 teams, and I don't know if they would, or I don't know if they could, or I don't know any of that stuff, does, something kick in that causes ESPN to not give you that X amount of money and change that amount? I don't know enough about the contractual stuff to answer that. A few more that we're going to have to save for next week, but I did want to get this one. Joey David asks, Julian Duggar question. Do you know how many top 50 quarterbacks are left-handed and where they are headed in college? And this is interesting. So I actually did look this up. I only went to the top 40 pro-style quarterbacks according to Rivals.com in the class of 2024. Top 40, because that's what they rank, is they don't go to the top 50 pro-style quarterbacks, and I didn't include any of the dual-threat guys because I just didn't have time to go through that whole list. But out of the top 40 pro-style quarterback prospects in the class of 2024, 2 of them are left-handed. One of them is Air Nolan, kid from Georgia, number 6 pro-style quarterback prospect in the country, number 67 overall recruit in the class of 2024. He's going to Ohio State. He's a lefty. And then KJ Jackson, who's the number 17 pro-style quarterback prospect in the country. He's a 4-star recruit. He's going to Arkansas. So Air Nolan going to Ohio State, KJ Jackson going to Arkansas. That's it in the top 40. Now, this question inspired me to look a little deeper and see what I could find. And you've got, your Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Steve Young and Ken Stabler, as far as lefties. Tua Tagovailoa, I apologize, just call him Tua, is a lefty. Wikipedia says he's the only left-handed quarterback in the NFL right now. I don't know if that's true or not, but he might be the only. If you want to tell me he's the only left-handed starter, I'll believe that. And I ended up on a Reddit thread from last fall, probably last October and last November. Somebody asked, I want to make a definitive list of every left-handed quarterback in college football. Can anybody help me? And everybody said no. A lot of people made jokes and gave this person a hard time. But he ended up coming up with a list of some sort. And it's interesting because there's not a lot of left-handed quarterbacks right now in college football. Brennan Armstrong is a left-handed quarterback, formerly of Virginia, now at NC State. So that's one, right? Michael Penix Jr. At Washington is one. Max Johnson, who is at, now this is a list from last season, but Max Johnson, who was at Texas A&M, he transferred there from LSU. Dylan Gabriel was a lefty as well. Hunter Deckers, who's in the news, quarterback at Iowa State, who apparently was gambling on games. This kid at West Virginia, Nico Martial, I apologize if I mispronounced his name. He's a left-handed quarterback. There are some out there. There's not a lot. And there was an interesting comment in the Reddit thread. Let me find it. Somebody said, any lefty playing football is doing so because they couldn't make it in baseball. And it's a stupid comment on Reddit, but that's pretty interesting. Like I sometimes talk about tight ends. It's harder to recruit tight ends. It's harder to get good tight ends or because there's fewer tight ends, because more guys who would have been top tight ends in college, coming out of the high school ranks, they're now slimming down a little bit and being big receivers, or bulking up a little bit and being defensive ends or offensive tackles. And so you have a smaller pool to choose from. Maybe it's true. Guys who could have been really good left-handed quarterbacks, most of them are going and play baseball, because you can make a lot of money as a left-handed pitcher in baseball. I hadn't really thought about that, and it's totally anecdotal, and it's totally just a Reddit joke, but I mean, I'll buy it. If you want to sell me that, I'll buy it. It seems reasonable that they're among the many left-handed pitchers in college baseball and the minor leagues and MLB. Probably quite a few of them were good quarterbacks in high school, I would think. So, to the original question, in the top 40 pro-style quarterback prospects in the class of 2024, 2 of them are left-handed. The other 38 are all righties. Make of that what you will. What you really need to do today to celebrate your Friday is go to homefieldapparel.com. Get 15% off your first order at Homefield with promo code LAIR23, LAIR23, and you'll get some of the best Pitt shirts you have ever seen and owned in your life. Homefieldapparel.com, LAIR23 is the promo code, 15% off your first purchase. I got to get done and get out of here and go to Pitt training camp. So look for our training camp report on Panther-Lair.com later today. We'll have all the coverage, photos, videos, write-ups, interviews, all those kinds of things. We'll have them all at Panther-Lair.com. So head over and check that out later this afternoon. Thanks for watching these videos all week. We appreciate it. We'll have tons of coverage and content coming throughout the weekend. So make sure you stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com. But before you go, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. Thanks again for watching the videos this week. Enjoy the Pitt coverage. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll talk to you on Monday for the Morning Pitt right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.